Okay, so let's now add some details. And in order to do details in Substance Designer, you have a lot of nodes that you can choose from in the Mesh Adaptive field. So let's scroll up here in our library, and you have a wide selection of cracks, fabric, leather, cloth wear, dirt, dripping rust, edge blur, dust, edge damages, the list goes on and on and on. And what most of these do is they take input mesh data, so whether an ambient occlusion map, a curvature map, and they will use that to drive functions in these graphs that create masks around certain areas. And you use those masks to either add dirt on top of it or dust. And in this case, you can use a material because technically dirt and dust, it's another material altogether. So dust and dirt on top of metal, you would want to layer an actual material on top of there, and then and just mask it out based on whatever features you want. But there are other cases when you have scratches. So maybe scratches on painted metal, you would want real metal underneath. But say you have scratches on top of steel, you may not necessarily want to use a different material. You may just want to modulate, say, the roughness of this material. So where it's scratched, the surface will be rougher. It'll reflect less light. So there are different ways of doing that in Substance Designer. So eventually what we have to do is bake some maps. And the great thing about Substance Designer is you can bake all of your maps within this program, and you don't even need high poly assets in most cases. Since we already have a normal map, we can use a normal map to create to bake curvature information and some ambient occlusion information as well, and it'll also take into account the actual mesh. Okay, let me see here. Let's just pick a material effect that we'd want to start. And when you're layering materials, we won't go into the whole process, but you kind of want to think about if you're going for realism, you want to consider what may actually happen to a material over time. Okay, so obviously over time things will collect dust and dirt, but in what order, right? So are things going to get scratched more first? Do you want to put dust and dirt on top of your scratches, or you want to go dirt first and then scratches and then maybe more dirt on top of that? It's really up to you. Is your environment going to have mud on the bottom? Do you want to have mud climbing the top of this, or do you not? So things like that are something worth considering, and more importantly, subtlety is something that you need to take into account. You really want to be careful pushing one effect too much. If you have the time, go through the effort and make scratches subtle. You notice them, but they're not the main event, right? Because that can kind of take away from the overall aesthetic of the object, make it look a little bit forced. So I'm not going to put in the time here to go through something just because I don't want you to sit in front of your computers and listen to me talk the whole time. But I do want to give you the main idea. Okay, so let's choose something like scratches. I'm going to start with scratches, and I'm going to add dirt and dust later. So you can here you have edge notches, you have edge wear. Notches are more they're stronger cuts into the material. Edge wear is another option. We have metal edge wear. That might be a decent one. The reason that a lot of these are focusing on edges is because you get a lot of cuts and scratches along the corners of things where things are scraped and hurt. Sometimes you'll get some wear on the face, but less. And it's also easier to create edge wear based on curvature maps, which again we'll bake in a minute. We'll get to the baking process next. First, I want to show you why we need these maps rather than just telling you to do it. So a surface brush is a good way to generate wear on the face of a surface, obviously, based on the name. We also have a paint wear option, which we can do for the painted metal. Let's drag that out there. Let's just do one at a time. Let's not clutter the scene too much for you. If you're getting started, it may be a little bit overwhelming. Let me just pick an edge wear. We'll choose this one. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the edge wear node. I'll delete the surface brush one right now. So we have what it's asking for here in this node is a curvature map and an optional mask. The curvature map is one map we're going to have to bake, so we can do that in Substance Designer by clicking on the mesh over here in your resources folder. This is the one that we imported before. When you right click on it, you select bake model information, and it opens a baking dialog box here. And at the top of the list, you'll see that I have some maps. These are the maps that I'd used previously for another project. I'll delete those now so you can see more than likely what you're going to start with. On the left, you have a hierarchy of your mesh items. It's possible in your 3D application to have different mesh objects and then exporting them as one item, as one file, but in Substance Designer you'll see a list of two different meshes. That's either separated by different materials in your 3D application or different objects. It really kind of depends on how you export them, I think. So in our case we just have one object and that's all we're going to bake for. So if you want to create a map, first you select hit this drop down arrow and you pick a map from here. We know we need a curvature map, but I can tell you by experience that we're probably also going to want an ambient occlusion map as well. But let's just do one at a time for your sake. So here we have a curvature map from the option, and what a curvature map will do is it'll create white or lighter. It'll be a grayscale map, and where the map is lighter in color, will be the edges of the map of the mesh, but not just the mesh. It'll also incorporate the normal map. So right here, where there's actually no polygon information around this metal plate, the curvature map will create a curvature there where you can create edge wear around this surface and any other one that is extruded. So down here we have all sorts of options for creating the file. That's all this is. So our output size will be 1024 because that's the document we want to use. Our UV set, you can use multiple UV sets. So if you're importing assets for Unreal Engine 4, for example, you're going to have another UV set for light maps, and you can choose which one you want to use in this case. For us, it's just going to be 0. Per pixel algorithm, you can leave as is because we're creating texture maps. Normal map this is where you want to first, you want to have your normal map imported as a resource over here, like we've done. And now you want to select this arrow, choose from resource, drop this box down, and then choose your normal map. And it's going to take into account not just your mesh over here, but also your normal map to create a pretty good curvature map for you. DirectX is the, like we discussed before, that's the normal orientation. OpenGL would be, again, your Y channel or your green channel. Same thing. It would be flipped, but we know that DirectX was the option that we chose. Details is something you can modulate. We'll leave it at 0.5 for now. We'll see how the map looks when it's done baking. Enable seams is fine. I don't know if it'll give us a pop-up box for what this actually means, but I never change these details and it turns out fine for me. The name we can leave. It'll use the mesh item name and then add it'll append the name of the map at the end. We're gonna leave it as a PNG. That's fine with me. We're just going to make it embedded. You can have the file linked and you can save it in another location if you want to use the file for something else. We're just going to embed the file and not worry about telling it where to save it. So you select OK. You give it a moment. Not even that long at all, actually, and it created the curvature map for us. So here it is. When you zoom in, there's all the information. So you can see right around these normal maps is where it created details for us. So we can use that to drive this edge wear effect. Wherever it's white is where the edges are on the mesh. And you can see how the map drives that information. So we're going to take this curvature map here, drag it into the graph, and right down here we'll just make a little column for all of our external textures. And if you want in Substance Designer, if you want to keep things a little bit more organized, say your materials section here, your textures section, you can drag a little box right here, highlight all of them by left clicking, then right click on your graph and choose Add Frame, and it'll frame all those contents. You select that once and you can change the title to, say, Materials. And that way you can manipulate all the items within that box pretty easily and keep them organized. You can do the same thing here, but we won't do that yet. Until we start to add more maps, we won't be concerned with it. So your edge wear is the effect that you want to drive. So what it requires here is a curvature map to work. Your mask is optional. Your mask will be used to say, if I want to add edge wear to, say, this part of the mesh or this part of the mesh, say just the gunmetal, and leave the, let's say, leave the blue paint alone, we'd have to create a grayscale mask to tell it just to add the effect around the gunmetal. And you can. We have, if you're thinking, well, we have color information, we don't have a grayscale mask for each individual part. It's a really quick node that you could make in, I believe it's in your filters, maybe your functions. If you don't know where it is, you can always type it in here. Mask, do a search, and say color mask. How about that? Nothing? Let's go to effects, perhaps. Mesh adaptive, material selector. Give me a moment while I find this. Essentially what you can do is create a mask from a grayscale mask from a color image. Try that again. I'll quickly fly through here. Color to mask, there it is. Okay, so you have your color input. Say I want to mask out just my painted metal area. I can add that mask here and then choose the color that I want. When I double click on this option, the properties come up over here. Let me double left click on this image to bring it into this editor down here. Select this once, color, pick, and then just choose my painted metal material ID. And I'll drag it. Well, let me just double click on this and you'll see here we now have a grayscale mask just for that particular color. Now you can plug that, say, for example, into this, and we just apply edgeware on the painted metal. That was a bit of a detour, but it's worth mentioning. If we don't cover that later, at least you know that it's possible here. So let's take our curvature map that we pulled into the scene here, connect it there, and there we have it. We'll double click on this node to bring up the final texture here in the window. And what you have is essentially edgeware in a black and white masked image over all the parts of our model. And you can control the intensity here with a level, which basically means the amount of edgeware that you have on your object. You can change the contrast, which basically means you have a grayscale image here with this level of wear. And you see you have whites and you have dark grays and light grays. If you want to increase the contrast, essentially what it'll do is you just keep chunks of white in, so maybe for harder chips instead of gradual brushes and wears. Edges width will basically create more wear around the areas where your curvature map is lighter, and then disorder will just kind of change the random variable that it uses to drive the effect. Play with it, and then whatever you like you can use. The great thing about this is you can see the final effect in the actual view. Now, how do we apply this to the model? I think to do this quickly, you could cheat it a little bit, and you can assume, okay, wherever there's edgeware anywhere on here, I want the metal to be, say, lighter. So we can use a common material for everything, and just assume that even if you, say, wear the this metal, you could have a steel color. Maybe that's a little bit cheating. Let's try this. I've changed my mind. Let's go to the material filter here, and let's go to a material adjustment blend. And all that is going to allow us to adjust the current material based on any number of any input channel. So we can adjust the diffuse, the roughness, or the metallic in this case. So I assume that when a material has been scratched, it's going to have a lighter diffuse color and then probably a rougher surface. So let's see if we can adjust all materials at the same time. Let's go. See, now we're going to want to input this graph, this effect. We're going to want to do it before this normal map node, because this will also create, can create some normal information for us if we want. And I can demonstrate that in a moment. Let's connect this. Okay, you notice what's going on here. I have just the normal channel connecting out of here that I can access by hitting the, oops, not the F1 key, but the 1 key. Let me close that browser quick. I accidentally hit the F1 key. If you hit the 1 key, you can see here, like we said before, we have the normal channel connected there. So what we want to do to save us some time, and because I'm going to continue adding nodes in between this one. So what I think I'm going to do here is to keep myself from always having to connect. I'm going to connect. I'm going to add another node here, and I'll explain why here in a minute, just to save me from having to connect and disconnect things too many times. I'm going to take a material blend node here, and when I connect this edgeware mask to this grayscale, this is what's going to drive this material effect, right? This mask that we created here. Now if I connect this material output here, it's taking all of my diffuse, my metal, my rough, and my normal information from this node, and it's going to pass it through here, and I can process this edgeware based on this effect. Now what I have here is I don't necessarily want to, every time I add a node, I don't want to have to separate this normal map and reconnect it to here and then remap the rest elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is add basically it's going to be a hub. Select the number, this blend node I just put out there, and I'm going to drag this normal down here. Let's see, I'm going to connect everything over here. And you're going to see that it looks a little bit wonky right now because nothing's connected into the input. Take this normal map, like I said, connect it down here, and then take this normal information and put it back into the normal map up there. And all this node is going to be just the very last node in our chain, so that I can quickly and easily add things in between without having to go through this fuss every time of rerouting the normal node and blending it with our normal map and blending it with the rest, if that makes sense. Okay. Actually, change this. I removed the wrong part. I need to move this normal map over here. There we go. Now you can see the effect that we want. You caught that. Okay, so now that I have this set up, our last hub, so that I can keep this unique connection the same way, I don't have to edit it anymore, so I can just add effects between these options. We drag this over, give ourselves some space to work with. Now we have a material adjustment blend here, and what this blend, you're not seeing any effect right now because this blend is not actually changing anything. All this does is allow me to change the different channels based on this mask information. So for example, for the diffuse channel, if I want to adjust the overall luminosity, which is essentially the value of this, I could. So based on the mask. So if I adjust that and make everything, say, a little bit lighter, you can see where our edgeware is taking effect. So everything on this model, all the diffuse colors, whether it's the blue or the gray, will increase the white levels a little bit. So that you can see more edgeware. And I think the edgeware effect is a little bit too intense for me, so I'm going to take the levels down. Maybe increase the contrast some to get some more details. We're working with a 1024 by 1024 map, so we may be limited in the amount of details that we're going to see anyway. Decrease the edge width a little bit also. There we go. We had a little bit of a blowout in some areas. And some effects you may decide that you don't actually like. It may not be doing exactly what you want. A lot of this just requires you to play with the map a little bit. So we increase the levels. Just kind of watch the effect here in my view. We drop the threshold a bit. Increase the edge width some. See what that gives us. I don't know that I'm loving this effect, truthfully. We might want to try a different one. Let's try an edge damages instead of an edge wear. So an edge damage map requires, you see here that you see mesh data, which is a very generic name. You can add a curvature effect, and you also need an ambient occlusion map to attract some more details somewhere else. We haven't baked the ambient occlusion map yet, so we can do that now by right-clicking on Box Hall, and then going to Bake Model Information, and then we can add an ambient occlusion map. The ambient occlusion map for mesh is a high poly to low poly projection. The ambient occlusion map by itself just uses the normal map and the actual mesh data. So let's set the map information to 1024. The normal map we choose from our resources right here. And then DirectX is fine. Quality, let's set to high. It may take a little longer to bake, but that's fine. We'll make it an embedded map. PNG is okay. And then right now we'll uncheck curvature, because when I select OK, it's going to rebake all of these maps once again. I don't necessarily need that because our curvature is fine. So I'm going to select OK. It might take a moment to bake ambient occlusion, but it does use GPU processing, I think, for some graphics cards, so it can be quite fast. Let me drag the ambient occlusion out here with the rest of our textures. Plug that into that slot, and it chose the wrong one, so let me press the number 1 key to open that up. Ambient occlusion there, curvature mesh there. Let's check the overall effect that we're going to get. That looks a little bit cleaner, but let's see how it looks in the final mesh. We can leave this node here in case we change our minds later. Let's see how this looks. There we go. I think I like that a little bit more. It's a lot more subtle, and it doesn't eat away at a lot of the textures like the other one was, right? So I'm going to delete this node. And if you can't see this very well in your in the screencast, I apologize. I'll try to get in a little bit closer. So let me see, increase the level a little bit and see what that gives us in the final image. Maybe some more scratches, more intensity in other areas. See, we have a nice little edge highlight now on these corners, on this wear, and on this surface right here. It's a good look. So increase the contrast a little bit. See how that looks? Make it a little bit sharper. You can add some edge intensity also. Okay, it's a pretty subtle look, but over here on this panel it looks kind of nice, at least from a distance. Maybe we'll decrease the intensity a little bit and see if we can recover some of that blue there. Take the level down a bit. There we go. Again, subtlety's key, but I won't spend too long on this. And then we can also change, go back to this material blend node that's receiving this mask, and we can change the roughness also. So let's increase the roughness by basically increasing the luminosity, which is the black to white value. So make it a little bit rougher where the areas have been scratched. So you can see the surfaces should be a little bit more dull where you scratch an object. We don't want to go too high. Try to make it, again, subtlety's key for most of these cases. Okay, I think that looks fine. We can move on. So we've added a general wear around most of the objects. What else do we have here in the mesh adaptive options? We have some dirt. Maybe we can try a surface wear that we saw before. A surface brush. And what kind of maps does this require? Okay, this requires a world space normal, curvature, ambient occlusion, and a position map. The position map is a grayscale map, so what it really is asking for is generally what kind of surface, on which surface do you want where? Do you want it on the top? Do you want it on the sides? Basically a position map. A grayscale position map can be an X, Y, or Z position relative to your model. A world space normal map is it's different. Essentially what it'll give you is options to modulate an effect based on the direction of your normals. Tangent space normal map is different. Without going into detail with that, we'll just bake one. Right click on your mesh over here in your Explorer. Now let's bring up a world space normal right here. and we'll bring up a position map. Let's see, position here. So with our world space options, it's pretty simple. We just select 1024 by 1024 and then our normal map, and what it'll do, it will convert our tangent space normal map to a world space normal map for us. And then we'll make sure that it's embedded. The standard naming convention is fine. And in the position map, we'll change the resolution to match the rest of our textures. And instead of doing an all-axis normal map, what this is requesting over here is a grayscale input. So we have to choose one direction, which is going to be one channel that we want the position to be. And I'm assuming it's going to be one axis, and I think maybe the, let's see, the forward-facing axis, which in this case, if I go back to my 3D modeling application, the forward-facing axis, I think it appears to be the y-axis. So I'm going to change that to y and see if that's correct. Make that embedded, and we're going to hit OK. We're going to deselect the ambient occlusion map. Wait a moment for it to bake. When they're finished, the textures will appear up here. There they are. World space normals, we'll drag it in there. And then position. Let's see how that works for us. Now let's make the connections to our new node. World space normals. This is our, I believe that's our curvature. Yes, right here. If you don't know what it is that you're looking at, sometimes curvature and ambient occlusion can be subtly different. You do have a higher color range, black and white range with ambient occlusion normally, but you can always left click on the tab, and then over here in the name you will see the name of the texture. So curvature here, ambient occlusion there, and then see if this position suits us fine. Double click on the mask to bring it into the editor. Yeah, and I'm correct. So right here is the face of our mesh item, which is this part right here. Right, you can see by looking at our, say, our normal map. Let's double click on that. This is our face right here with those details. Double click again on our wear information, our surface wear, and that's on the face. So let's see what happens when we can do this two ways. We can use the same material effect, meaning, you know how we change the diffuse and the roughness values here based on these scratches. What we can do is we could just add these masks together to drive the same effect, because essentially they're both wear and tear. Okay? So we can do that by adding a blend node here by right-clicking on the background. And the foreground, let's say, will be this mask here. The background will be here. We'll change the blend mode to multiply, because I would like to add, no, I think we'll change it to add. Yeah, add linear dodge, because I want these white values here to be added on top of these black values here, and multiply would essentially make these black values black in the final product. Let's add this here. Let's see what happens to our final model. Okay, the total edge wear is a little bit strong, in my opinion, so maybe I'll decrease the scratch length a little bit to shorten them up. Drop the level a little more to make it more subtle. And then see if we can occlude the wear a little bit based on the axis. So it looks like the axis that you can occlude from is going to be based on the world space normal map. So you can limit edge wear to certain areas. I may just, again, I'll keep this subtle. What this is doing is essentially breaking up our solid color there in the front. Increase the level a little bit more, see what that gives us. It's a subtle effect. At least it should be. I don't know that I love it too much, but it does provide a pretty good demonstration of what's possible. Let me go back to this material adjustment that this mask is modulating, and I'll go back to the diffuse color, and I'm going to increase the luminosity a little bit more. I'll drop it more, make it subtle. Go back to the edge wear, see if I can make those pop out a bit. Okay, it's fine. Again, it's a very subtle effect, but we'll get more appeal probably over adding dirt to things. Another effect that I like, just move on here, is the sun bleach effect, which can generally if something's out in the sun, essentially from the top, colors will tend to fade. In this object, say it's inside, that's fine, but even from the top, whether it's objects being placed on top or dust sitting on a surface for a long period of time, or just bright lights, ultraviolet lights of some kind, can cause things to fade, and it mostly happens from the top. So when we add this sun bleach node here, it's going to ask for world space normals and ambient occlusion map, which we have both of those now. So we can drag this node over here, add our world space normals and our ambient occlusion map. We'll drag this over, and I'm going to use another material adjustment node just so I can change some values. Probably just some diffuse values to desaturate a lot of these colors based on the sun bleach. So let me pipe this. Sorry, that's a mask. I duplicate this material blend node. I could drag another one from the library, but since I already have one out here, I just left click once on this node, Control Shift D to duplicate it without linking it. Drag this mask into the bottom, pipe this material node here, and replace it so I can place it in series there. And now I need to keep in mind, and what I actually may do, I may delete this, because when I duplicate this node, what's going to happen is the changes I've made with the roughness and diffuse will be copied over. So I can start from scratch. I'm just going to add another material adjustment blend node there. So I can start from a clean slate. Pipe that back in again. Open this up, and I just want to change the diffuse values. So maybe desaturate them a little bit and see what the final effect is on my mesh. And so I'm focusing only on the top part. You can see the top part of my normals there, and the top part of my mesh here is what's driving the effect. I may have to make this effect more drastic to see what's going on. It's probably going to be mostly visible on my painted metal. And maybe change, maybe like make it a little bit brighter. There we go. That shows a little bit more. And then tweak the hue a little bit, if possible. I'm not seeing much of an effect there, so I won't fuss with it for now. Change it back to 0.5. And I can change the blend mode if I would like to a add. And that makes it a much stronger effect because essentially it's adding the color information, so I need to be more careful with how much I desaturate or how much luminosity I add. Probably too intense for my liking, so I'm going to change that blend mode back to normal. Increase the luminosity slightly here. And also, I think I might want to mask out some of the effect that this is having. So in order to do that, I'm just going to do a simple blend between a noise. So maybe take a cloud texture here. And then I'm going to add a blend node and multiply that cloud texture. So wherever the cloud texture is black, I'm going to remove this this effect so I can break up the surface a little bit more. see if we can see that effect better here. Essentially break it up a little bit more. So this entire top surface was essentially white before. Change that to multiply. There we go. So you're going to see there that it's going to change the color and a little bit. It's going to give me some more variation, essentially. Again, break things up so it doesn't look so procedural. Okay. And now I think I'm going to take this same cloud texture and I'm going to just adjust the overall color of all of these materials, because again, it's very rare to have a very solid blue color across an entire image, not just because of dirt or wear over time or sun fading, but just the way things are manufactured. You're going to get subtle differences and changes in color. So I'm going to take this material, our new material blend node, and then I'm going to try to use this cloud texture here. Just reuse the same one again to save on performance. Pipe that in there, put it in series, and what I want to do is just change the overall diffuse color and just break things up a little bit. See how this looks. That's a very strong effect. It has to be much lower. But if you see what I mean, it'll just add a little bit more realism to the color. Maybe 0.05. And then maybe change the blend mode to, let's see what happens when we multiply. I don't like multiply. I think I might prefer add. Normal it is, and then perhaps desaturate things a little bit more also in those areas. We should notice that mostly in this blue part. There we go. I can see it. I don't know how well you can see it on the screencast, but there's a subtle change in the material, and I might change the roughness very slightly. Maybe by a 0.02. Again, just to get some overall smudge and wear on all these surfaces. Again, it'll be a very subtle effect, but as the light changes on a surface, you're going to notice little things like that. That this whole part here has just a little bit of grime on it. Perhaps you can see it down here when you change the light source. I can on my image. And if we want to make it more intense, the effect more intense, I can just add a levels node between that and this. Between this mask and what I'm trying to accomplish here with this mode. So I don't change the overall cloud effect that's blending with my over top of my scratches. But what I am doing is changing the overall effect it's having on this material adjustment here. So if I increase the luminosity here, you see how it's breaking up the surface a little bit more, adding some grime. I'm going to increase the white levels on this, try to tighten up the, well, that's probably going to increase the overall contribution, but maybe sharpen this image up a little bit more. There we go. You can see this is the old cloud texture here. So I get a little bit more grime on the surface. And even down here. Right, so it really, what it does is it kind of creates the effect of smudges, maybe fingerprints, that kind of thing. So the diffuse colors changed a little bit. Maybe make the image material slightly rougher, by increasing the luminosity to maybe 1. There we go. If you can see in the light there, it breaks up the surface a little bit more. Okay, so let's add a few more effects on here. I think we should add some rust. Generally, you only see rust, particularly on painted metal, wherever the metal is exposed and it's been scratched. So we can easily do that because we have a mask over here for scratches that we can use to add a rust material. And since rust technically is metal, though it's changed enough in its surface properties that I think it can be considered a separate material altogether. And it would overlay equally on any type of metal. So let me add a rust base material here, and then in my material filters I'm going to add a material blend, and using a mask I'm going to mask the rust. In material 2 slot, the mask will modulate whatever's coming into the material 2, like I explained before. Material 1 will be the material pipe that we've been working on so far. Let me move this down here so it's closer, and then we'll add this back into the main material pipe. So right now you're not going to see any change in the content because we don't have any mask driving this material effect here. But what I will do is go over to our scratches, which I believe is here. Yeah, this is our material adjustment for our, no, that's our sun bleach. And this is our edge damages and surface. So this blended mask right here, I'm going to take over to our rust to drive where our rust is happening. And so you can see here, I kind of like that look. We have rust wherever our metal has been scratched according to that mask. It's coming on a little strong here, so what I think I'm going to do, one, what problem I have now is the rust is showing up wherever I would have exposed metal, and I don't want that to happen in every location, right? So what I'm going to do is use some levels to modulate the mask mask intensity in places. Okay, so everywhere I have white here, I don't necessarily want to see white here. So what I'm going to do is decrease the white levels here in certain parts and see if that works. Otherwise, maybe I'll use a gradient editor, and I can explain that here in a moment. First, let's just try using some levels and see what that gets me. Add a levels node there and pipe that into our mask. And let me decrease our white values. I want to decrease here, so our original mask, decreasing the white values there. Okay, that probably works fine in most cases. So let me take back to the original value, which is about here. You can see the white values in our mask are pretty much here. So wherever there's white, you're going to see rust come through in this mask, because it's the same mask driving the scratches. But what I want to do is decrease the white levels. So right here, this is the mid-range of the image. You can't really see the histogram for what's coming in, but this is the mid-range grays right here. So it gets whiter as it comes across. So if I want to push the range at which the whites are coming through, because wherever the whites are coming through is where I'm going to see rust. So if I want to push the whites back a little bit and decrease the rust, you can see it's I'm losing some white values here. So the rust is coming through more subtly in a lot of these locations. I still have way too much rust on these pipes here, probably because the curvature level's high on the pipes, just based on them being round. So what I might do altogether, you see where it's really white right here for these pipes? I may just add a mask around the rust for those pipes, because I don't really like that color. In order to mask out specific areas, what I think I'm going to do, I can do this a couple ways. If I just want to isolate these specific areas, I'll just do it. I'll add a vector graphics node, which will, heck, it doesn't have to be vector graphics, I'll just paint it. I'll add a new bitmap file. It's 1024 by 1024. I won't worry about the name right now. Here's the bitmap right here. And I'm just going to paint on areas where I want that mask to disappear. And then I'm going to blend it together. I'll show you what I mean here. Use a blend node. And then I'm just going to use this as a mask at the moment. Oops. And then I think I'm going to use some clouds to kind of break this up a little bit again. Let me add some cloud texture here, and I'll pipe that into the mask. So right now, I want to use the clouds to darken areas. So let me multiply. Change that to a grayscale image. Delete this node. Pipe it back in because I want this to be a grayscale texture. Okay. I'm not getting the effect that I want here. I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, that's why, because I have this mask plugged in. Okay. So this cloud texture is kind of breaking up the rust a little bit for me. Let me plug this blend node in here, and you'll see that I have less rust on these pipes. That actually may be sufficient for me. But what I don't really want is for the rust to be broken up on the body here too much. Let me see how the overall effect appears. And I also want to make sure that I mask the rust off the hose because rubber does not rust. So in order to do that, because this is our overall rust blending node here, I need to create the color to mask function like we talked about before. Drag that in here, and wherever I have the rust color on our material ID map, I need to make sure that I'm not getting any rust. Sorry, wherever I have the rubber color on the material ID mask, I'm not getting any rust. So double click on this material ID over here in the library. Single click here on this node for the color ID. And I'm going to pick the rust out of there. And so the effect we're going to get is nothing. Try that one more time. Material ID, pick that color. And I'm not getting a mask. Not sure why. Obviously, because I don't have it plugged in. Forgive me, folks. There we go. Now I have that plugged in. Decrease the range here a bit, so I just isolate it to that rust color. Now I'm going to have to blend these. I'm just going to blend the RGB and this one together. No, let me just. It doesn't matter at which point. Now again, because this mask, I need to invert it because what it's going to allow the the rubber part to be the only part that it's allowing rust to come on, because that's the way the mask is set up. So if I type invert here, I have a grayscale inversion node available with substance. So eventually what this is doing is allowing rust anywhere on the model except for where there is rubber. And I can blend this really at any point. I'll just probably blend it with a master here. Duplicate that node. I'm starting to get a little bit crowded here. Make some room. I'm going to blend this mask with just going to multiply these two together. There we go. Okay, so you can see here where I have the first rust mask, and now where I've added the rubber, it turns black altogether. So the ultimate effect should be no rust on the hose, and if you look down here, all the rust is gone off the hose. I may be moving a little fast for some of you, but those of you that have some experience with compositing, this should make sense. Okay, so let's continue with breaking up some of the rust that's on top of this here, on top of these pipes. I actually don't think it looks too bad anymore, truthfully. I may want to leave it, but it's looking strange up top here. It's a little bit too heavy, so I may break it up a little bit. Okay. So only in the areas of let me just take this cloud texture here, and I'm going to only focus the cloud's effect on these areas here where we have the pipes. So I'm going to take our bitmap here, and with my brush, I'm going to double click on this node, single click here so I can paint on top, and I'm just going to paint some white on here. I'm going to change my brush size, which you can do by selecting this brush options right here or here. This is probably the fine one here. And you can see the ultimate effect down there. Maybe I'll add a little bit of noise to it. Okay, so I'm going to paint some white here. It's probably too much noise for my liking. Let me just do a solid color. Okay, very sloppily cover that here. So that's where I want to have the this effect isolated. I'm going to mask this. So I have my clouds really just focused on my pipes at the moment. It's not going to, these clouds aren't going to break up the rust effect anywhere else. And now I'm going to push the effect of these clouds essentially with some levels. And then drop the white value some. I should see the rust disappear on a lot of these pipes. Oh, I'm missing these pipes down here, that's why I'm not seeing the effect. So let me go back to this image. I'm going to paint some white down here. There we go. So change my levels back a little bit. I went a little bit too extreme. There we go. So you can see now that I'm getting some rust show up down here, but it's very subtle. And that's what I want. I don't want anything too extreme. Same thing here. I can tweak that until the cows come home, I'm sure. So I won't worry about it too much more. Okay, and now this overall blend, it's probably coming on a little bit too strong with this blend mode. So I think I'm going to change the overall levels. Well, anyway, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. Lastly, I think we can add some overall dust to this object, and we'll probably do it from the ground up. There's a nice mesh adaptive mode here called, let me find it, ground dirt, which should modulate the effect based on the Y position. There may be another one here. Called bottom rust. Maybe I made that up. Ground dirt should work fine. So we're going to have to bake another position map from the, basically the, in my application it was Z up, so I think that probably matters in this case. So let me go back over to this, our mesh. We'll right click, go to bake model information. We will pull this menu down, deselect the maps we've already done, and add another position. And it's going to be one axis. I think it should be the Z. We'll call this Z. We'll make sure it's embedded, and it's 1024. And we'll bake. See what happens. And I think, if you look at this map, that is not the direction that we want. Let's try this again. Let's go to rebake, and we'll change the axis. You can right click on a specific texture and just rebake that only one. Let's go to Y and see what we get. Okay, and that's modulating based on height. So the highest values will be where the effects are going to take place, I believe. So let's drag this texture into our row. This is going to be height. Connect this to our position and see what kind of dirt we get. So let's bring the levels way, way down. And our dirt is being attracted at the top. So what we're going to want to do is invert our height mask. Just type invert in here. Better yet, we have one out here already. Our invert node is invert here. We'll just duplicate this one, Control Shift D, bring it over here, and connect the other end here to our Z. And now we should get more white at the bottom. Let's bring our levels up. Let's try a different node altogether. That didn't work very well. Invert grayscale. So world position. Getting a strange effect here. Let me change the dirt height. Maybe that'll make a difference. And I may not have to invert that. I could be mistaken. So quickly, we'll wrap this up by adding another material here. Let's see. We'll add a. Let's see. Maybe an earth texture. I have one of those. We'll add earth to the list. And we'll create a material blend like the one we have here. We'll just duplicate this one. And we'll add dirt to the top. Our mask there. We'll pipe in our complete texture there. Let's drag these over to make ourselves some room and keep things clean. There we go. See how this looks. So I think I was wrong. I don't need to invert this at all. If you just hit the delete key, it'll delete the node and relink the materials for you. Let's change the level and the intensity here. Drop the dirt height a little bit. Okay, and you can see what we're getting. The top is staying clean, and on the bottom of this object we're getting some dirt. based on the height of the map. Okay, so we can change the level of dirt here, and this is the map we're looking at ultimately. So that basically will make it really, really dirty based on the bottom. The dirt will be a lot more spread out, or we can make the effect more subtle by decreasing the level or the intensity of the dirt, which, as you've heard me say, I think subtlety is key. There we go. We have some dirt there, and some dust, and then some height. And now what we can do, if we want to modulate the color of this earth, we can do that a couple ways. We can use this texture, or we can add another cloud texture, say, to kind of drive the earth texture if we want. You just simply multiply a cloud node by the diffuse coming out of here, if you want. I don't think we'll go into that at the moment. I think this is plenty dirty and filthy for us. And we can call this guy done if you want. I think I've explained the overall gist here. So what we can do now, like I said before, if you're finished with this and you want to import this into Unreal Engine 4, they have a beta plugin for substances. So you can essentially export this whole graph here, clicking on your parent graph and saying publish. It'll publish this as a substance file that you can then bring into Unreal Engine and change a lot of these settings on the fly if you expose them. I didn't go into exposing parameters. It's not really the subject I want to go into too much right now, but that is really one of the most powerful aspects of Substance. Instead, what you can do, if you just want to create textures, is you can go to your parent graph here, your master graph, and you can export bitmaps as images. And what we can do is we'll save them as targets for the Unreal Engine, and then we'll pick a location here. I'll make an image folder called textures, and that'll be the folder that we'll save them in. And then we'll use Boxhall as the textures, and then we can hit save. But one thing I did realize is one thing you can do. I'll say it quick. You have a color information here on the diffuse texture, as you can see. All three channels you need, but you're not using anything in the alpha, and the same as the normal map. And so right now you have the roughness and you have the metallic, which essentially are independent images that you're not going to be able to import directly into Unreal Engine. So what you actually have to do here is you need to take the value, essentially this 8-bit image, and you need to import them into the alpha channel of each one, and you can output them like that directly from Substance. In order to do that, I'll just explain pretty simply how it's done. I'll duplicate these two images for you, these two outputs, and we're going to make a separate one. We're going to keep these outputs the same because these are the outputs that Substance uses to drive their 3D renderer here. What we're going to do is create a separate output that's not necessarily going to be rendered here, but we're going to use them as our final texture outputs so that you can use them in Unreal Engine. So we're going to have to do some channel combining here. In order to do that, just type the word channel in the search box here to filter, and you're going to do an RGBA merge. I grabbed the wrong one. RGB-A merge. So you're going to take some RGB information from, that was a split, here's the merge. You're going to take some RGB information from these color channels, and then you're going to take a single 8-bit image, a black and white image, and then what you're going to do is pipe them in here and combine them into one image here. So the final alpha of your diffuse is going to be it can be anything you want, but we're going to take the diffuse, and let's just say we'll add the roughness behind the diffuse. So to demonstrate, I'm going to hit the number 1 key on my keyboard to expose these parameters here on this final material output here node for us, and I'm going to pipe that diffuse into the RGB channel, and then I'm going to take the roughness output, the black and white image, and put it in the alpha, and then that combination I'm going to put right here in the diffuse. I'm going to call this diffuse rough. Do the same here. And these channels aren't really important here for export at the moment, because we're just gonna make these into textures. And I'm gonna duplicate this merge box, and I'm gonna take this normal map that we have here, our final normal map that's combined with all the rest, and then we're gonna take our metallic map, and we're gonna pipe that, because it's a black and white image, we're gonna pipe that into the alpha here, and then into the final normal metal, we'll call that. Okay, so these images are going to be RGBA images that we can put directly into Unreal import, and it'll also save on the number of images that you're using in your materials. It's always good to save and consolidate space when you can. I know these images look weird. That's just this final normal map, because you're seeing the alpha information from the metallic map. You can always select there's a box down here you can't currently see because I have this Substance Designer is maximized, but there's a box down here, I won't worry about it, that you can toggle the alpha on and off. So no worries if it looks strange. Okay, so we have our 6 outputs here, but we're only going to use these last 2. So how do we do that? We go over to our master graph over here, right click, export as bitmaps as output. We're going to select none down here to deselect everything. We're just going to select diffuse rough, normal metal, and we're going to export those to the same textures folder we had before. Hit save all, and then make sure you save your substance graph. And then I'll conclude this now, and then we'll load the mesh and the textures into Unreal Engine 4, and we'll wrap this baby up. Thanks.